All right, I got Dr. Elia Gourgouris on the show. He is a PhD in psychology, #1 best-selling author, an expert in happiness, and the president of the Happiness Center. Dr. Elia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Man, I'm excited. Right now, happiness has been the biggest talk that we hear a lot about right now, especially with a world coming post-pandemic. We see the numbers are skyrocketing with depression, anxiety, and people are looking for that happiness pill, if you will. And I don't think there's any pill you can take or any hack you can do, but you've outlined in your book the 7 paths of how to acquire happiness. What are the best in the world? What have we found? What does the data show that actually makes somebody fulfilled and happy? So I'm excited to jump into it with you. Curious though, before we get started, like, what drove you into this work? I'm sure in the world of psychology, you could have studied anything and everything, but you chose happiness.
You know what? The first half of my career, I was a clinical psychologist in private practice, full practice. I was working like a maniac and I loved it. Um, but at some point, and actually when I retired from a psychologist, I realized that most psychologists last 10 years before they get burned out. And
Wow.
if they see, let's say, 20 to 25 patient hours a week, that's considered full time. Well, I did it for 18 years, and I would see 45 people a week. Like, these are actually patient hours, like back to back. And my wife would be like, "You're going to have a heart attack, like you're crazy." I'm like, I was very arrogant and prideful, like, "No, I can handle it. I'm like Hercules. I'm Greek, right? I can handle anything." Well, I did for the first 16 years, and then I crashed and burned. Like, at some point, it caught up with me, and physically almost like took me out of this life. So it was a very serious. So when I exited, I had a couple of surgeries. I won't bore you with the gory details, but long story short, I asked my surgeon, when you spend like 6 nights in the hospital emergency and you're like, it is touch and go, you have a lot of time to think and to ponder and to reflect. So at the end, I said, listen, I need to learn this lesson because it's so painful on so many levels. Why did this happen to me? Because I never want to be here again in my life. I need to learn this lesson now. And he said, oh, that's easy. Either excessive drinking or excessive stress. Now, I don't really drink. And like excessive, like I'm the happiest, happy-go-lucky and so on. But what had happened is over the 18 years and tens of thousands of hours of listening to people's, issues and so on, I was very passionate about my work. Like I had a full practice, people on a wait list, never marketed once. It was always word of mouth. So I had a huge practice. But I think over the time I stored stress into my body in such a way, and I was disconnected from my body, honestly. I wasn't practicing self-care. I just had a positive attitude, but that's not enough. So I paid a huge price for it. Anyway, I came out of that. I'm like, okay, so you've dealt with the diagnosis and kind of the darker side of life. But I'm a being of light, and I've been that way since I was a kid. It comes natural. It's easy. It's that I have like, I think my late mom that I channel a lot, who was an unconditionally loving human being, whom I lost very early in my life, which is unfortunate. But I have so much love in my heart and happiness and so on. I'm like, I want to focus now on more positive things in life. So instead of therapy, more like coaching and positive psychology. And because you never get burned out doing that, right? So fast forward to like 2015, I got my book out, 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness. And to my amazement, it became a #1 bestseller. It's been translated into 5 languages. But I wrote the book from my heart, Joel, not as a PhD. I wrote it just like I'm talking to you right now. And the things that are the 7 paths to lasting happiness all came from my patients. My client, my patients taught me that over 20 years, 25 years, 30 years of what works and what doesn't work. So when I say happiness is a choice, I mean it, but it's also a skill set. And if we do certain things on a consistent basis, then we will find that. And I guarantee that. Now, there was a big debate about the book. A lot of people were like, well, just call it 7 Paths to Happiness. It's catchy. It's like easy to remember. And I'm like, no, you're missing the point. There's so many books out there about happiness. I don't want some pop psychology, superficial, I'm talking about lasting, deep, profound, and transformative happiness. So we're not back here in 6 months from now facing the same issues we've been dealing with for the last 20 years. So if we do it, let's do it right the first time. And that's how I used to talk to my clients. And I still do, actually. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. So that's why my focus, and the book became like, I wrote it from my heart. I put everything in it. And I think it resonated with people because they're like, man, this is doable. right? Because at the end of every chapter, I have a couple of points for the reader to consider and to think about, to ponder, a couple of questions for them to ask, but then more importantly, take action.
Bingo.
Because Joel, in life, as you know, it doesn't matter what we know in life. What matters is what do we do with what we know. That's the biggest difference. We all know, don't we all know?
Yeah.
We do. Every New Year's resolution, billions of people across the globe have the two, and they're always the same. I want to get in shape. I want to lose some weight. Every year this happens. Why does it happen every year? Because we don't follow through, right? Because if we did, we would have different resolutions next year, not the same ones over and over again. So for me, it's the take action. That's a key part. In take action, you don't have to transform your life overnight in all these different areas. That's why I like the book Atomic Habits. That book really resonates with me. Like, take one aspect of your life, do it consistently every day, and notice what happens in 365 days from now. And I'm talking about only one area of your life. Now do that in 7 areas of your life and then see what happens.
Yeah, wow. I love what you said, man. I always tell my clients action is the antidote, always. And I agree. Happiness is a choice. You can choose in that moment to be happy. How do you differentiate, though, when clients or they're coming to you and they're saying, yeah, sure, it's always a choice to be happy. It sounds very Pollyannish, right? Like, always look on the bright side. Oh, life is teaching me something. Life is happening for me, not to me. Like, yeah, that's a great speech, right? But how can they practically do that when, it really feels like, for example, I think the other expression is, if you've got a pile of crap, you can't just pour positive psychology and sugar on it, and now the pile of crap's no longer there, right? So how do you kind of help people navigate through that when they have maybe that very analytical mind, or just like, sure, I can always spin it to be happy, but we still are dealing with a pile of crap here?
First of all, a lot of the things that you're saying I've used and I continue to use too. The specific one about, and I go back to one of my all-time role models, I guess you would say, is Nelson Mandela, which I admire for his humanity and so on. One of the things that he talked about, he said, in life, either you win or you learn. And I really like that because, you and I, and I'm sure the audience, we've had some successes in our lives. I'm sure all of us have to be at where we are right now. But the greatest lessons I've ever learned have come not from any of my successes. They've come from what at the time appeared to be setbacks, weaknesses, human frailties, mistakes. But when you reflect back, like, I am who I am now as a result of what happened back then. Now, when you're going through it, it sucks. It's terrible. It's painful. It could be traumatic, whatever the case. But if you pull back the lenses, and I've been fortunate, I've been able to always pull back the lenses and see the big picture. And my wife says that, like, man, you always have the big picture perspective. No matter what happens, what is the big picture? When you have that, then the things that seem negative or hurtful or a pile of crap, like you talked about, is actually a blessing in disguise. And I proclaim that we are all graduates from the University of Adversity. Right? It's true. And the older you get, the higher your degree, because you've been on this world longer, you have more adversity, right? So, obviously one of the 7 paths to happiness is gratitude. And we all know, have an attitude of gratitude. It rhymes, it's cute, it's adorable, and it's also true. Because you cannot be physiologically depressed in a grateful state and physiologically depressed simultaneously. That's physiologically impossible in the brain. So when things are going well, it's easy to be grateful, obviously. I could do a gratitude journal and write 3 things every day and never repeat myself for a whole year if you actually think about it. The question then is, can you be grateful when you're in the midst of adversity? Because that's not easy. And this is when I go back to Nelson Mandela's comment about that. So if you can find the lesson, work through it, get a coach, a mentor, a therapist, whatever meditate, pray, whatever works for you. Because you do have to cleanse your spirit, I think, and your soul, and especially if you've had some serious trauma. And, being a clinical psychologist for 18 years, I heard a lot of that. The other thing, of course, is the self-care aspect, which, I'm ashamed to say, when I was younger, I didn't really practice self-care because I was like, go, 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 go. I was like, and as I've gotten older, I realized the importance of self-care. And when the pandemic hit, because I think the world is different. And right before the pandemic, I got a download, Joel, like I'm talking to you right now. It was March 15th of 2020, at the very beginning of, and March 15th is kind of this symbolic day in literature, like, beware the Ides of March, Julius Caesar, Shakespeare. It's a big day. And the download was, as I'm sitting right here, was, remember, that's early on, like maybe New York was like ground zero back then, and maybe in Europe there was more of the pandemic. It hadn't really hit across the United States. I heard it in my mind, in my soul. There is a mental health crisis tsunami coming as a result of this pandemic. Like, it's going to sweep the globe. So you need to get a book out to address it. And you need to get out in 45 days, which I thought was absurd. And I'm like, what the hell? My first book took 4 years to write. How am I going to get a book out in 45 days? That's ridiculous, actually. But it was so powerful, I couldn't deny it. So I called my best friend, and writing partner. I said, listen, brother, I'm going to start writing this book. I need your help. I can't do it on my own. And I kid you not, for 45 days, we did nothing else. And we got the book out in May, which was called 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis, How to Emotionally Deal with Pandemics and Other Disasters. And it was the first book to market in the world about the pandemic. Mm. And, we wrote it initially for the everyday people. Like, how can we help? Like, practical tools, how to deal with what's coming, what's happening. What we didn't anticipate was that organizations started to reach out, and specifically Bank of America from New York. This is like in July of 2020. This is like in the early stages. And they're like, listen, we have 1,000 employees in New York City. Obviously, they're all working remote, and they're so traumatized. And I remember New York was like, people, like the morgues were full. It was awful. They're depressed. They're anxious. They're stressed. Some of them have had COVID. Some of them have lost loved ones to COVID. And we just don't know what to do, Dr. Lee. Can you help us? And I did so. I got on, just like I'm talking to you right now.
You said first thing, turn off the news.
What's that?
The first thing you told them is turn off the news.
No, actually, that is one of them. You're darn right. Did you know that? Yes, that's what I did say. That is one of them.
Dr. Elia, I was in San Francisco at the time of the pandemic, so I know what the fear was like, at the time. And so, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, turn off the news. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you should be ignorant. But, get your sources. Everybody has their own sources, but don't be ignorant. Check your sources, number one.
Yeah.
But stop listening to the news, which were every single day breaking news with this noise and all that. I'm like, you know what? I haven't watched the news in like 3 or 4 years. I'm very informed, and I read about, like, globally about political and all kinds of things. But I don't buy into the fear. I'm not a fear-based person. I refuse to buy into the fear. So, and I ended up actually kind of funny because, all my speaking engagements got canceled like anybody else because I speak around the world on happiness and wellness. So I started doing Zoom. I didn't even know Zoom back then. Like, I'm the technologically inept. Now I do it all the time. It's kind of funny because I ended up speaking to more people around the world during the pandemic because of Zoom than I had live. Even though I do like live more because I feed off people, the audience energy.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it was so fraught with fear and concern with people. I got a lot of pushback. I'm kind of like you. I challenge the system in a lot of ways. And we were split. Vaccines, no vaccines. Masks, no mask. And it was so loud from both sides. And I had to walk a very fine line between. But I was leaning more into the less fear, I guess. Let's just put it that way. So I had people like say, well, it sounds like you're not taking this seriously. I'm like, I am taking it seriously. I wrote a book about it. What do you mean? How much more serious can I take it?
Yeah.
Well, you sound a little flippant about it, wearing masks, whatever. I'm like, listen, I can't live in fear. That would be, then my life is over. If I live in fear what if you get sick? I'm like, okay, and then what? Well, what if you get really sick? I'm like, okay, and then what? Well, what if you die? So I would lean to the camera, okay, and then what? Aren't we all going to die? I'm not saying I want to die right now. I want to see kids, grandkids, and so on. But what I'm saying is I'd rather live without fear than live under these conditions.
Yeah.
And that was challenging people because they didn't know what to make of that statement, honestly. And I'm glad that I held that line. I never deviated from that. I'm like, this is who I am. If you don't like it, that's okay too. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you, for me personally, I'm not going to live in fear no matter what. Period. Because if you're fear-based and you make decisions from a fearful place, usually most of those decisions, and I've done them too, it's not like I haven't done them in the past, don't turn out very well.
I agree. They usually don't turn out very well at all.
They don't. So I can't have my happiness and wellness while I'm fearful at the same time. Those two things cannot coexist in my world.
Yeah, I love
Now,
that.
do you practice more self-care? Absolutely. That was my whole point. Before the pandemic, I used to walk like, 3 times a week for an hour, like get 3 miles and whatever, because I had to. I'm getting older, I got to move, whatever. When the pandemic hit and my own stress level started to increase with family and kids all over the country, I had one son in graduate school at Columbia University in New York. As my stress level increased, I'm like, you got to up the ante in your own self-care. So I started walking every day for at least 3 miles. And I haven't stopped since then. That was April of 2020. It's been over 4 years now. And now I do it because I want to, not because I have to. And that's a whole different way of approaching life. And half the time, Joel, I don't take my phone with me.
Wow.
And the time,
That's key.
which I used to do before all the time, I leave my phone here and I go for a walk. And I call it my gratitude walk. Now I look at the blue skies and I listen to the birds and I watch the little, critters or whatever. And, we live in a beautiful area here in Colorado. And I express my gratitude for a full hour. When I get back, my batteries, and I'm not talking about my physical batteries, my emotional and mental battery, I'm completely full. I can take on the world after that. And now this has become a habit. And I don't compromise that. My self-care is not to be compromised. And as a result, I'm actually better and healthier than I was 20 years ago when I had my crisis. Physically, I'm chronologically 19 to be exact years older, and I'm healthier physically, emotionally, and mentally because I do practice I walk the talk. I would never ask anybody to do something I'm not doing it myself. I would never do that. That's just out of integrity. So if I say something to you and to your audience, I do it.
Yeah.
Period.
I love that. I coach a lot of men and help them with their marriages and their fatherhood. And, we see a lot of them going through crises, like you said, in their marriage and some of them are separating. And I said, listen, guys, you need to double down on your self-care. And it seems counterintuitive, right? Because that's when you want to isolate. That's when you want to just hold everything in and hunker down. That's when you don't invest in coaches. That's when you don't invest because you feel like I need to play small and I don't have the time, Dr. Elia. I don't have the time to walk or work out. And actually, that even means even more so. You actually need to make that time. You need to go out and do the gratitude walk because you're going to have your battery charged so much, you're going to be able to withstand this crisis or whatever you're facing, I think. And that's kind of what you're talking about too.
There's no such thing I don't have the time. It's a choice. I could say I don't have the time. It's just a choice. I put that part first and then everything else falls into place. So one of the things that we discovered with our second book is that when people are facing, let's not call it crisis anymore. Let's just call it challenges.
Yeah.
And people fall into 4 categories in the way that they react to those challenges. So the first one is the victim. The victim modality is like, why is this happening to me? As if it's only happening to me and not 7 billion other people. Anyway, that's another. That's number 1. Number 2 is the critic. Now, the critic will criticize, is frustrated, angry, upset, and will criticize everybody, their spouse, their kids, their boss, the government, the World Health Organization, it doesn't matter. They're always they're always mad, miserable, That's number 2. The third one we like to call the bystander, basically somebody who is frozen in fear because they are so overwhelmed by the changes that are taking place in society or even in their own lives, they just don't know what to do. So they don't do anything. They're just frozen, right? And what all 3 of these personality types have in common is what? None of them move the needle forward to some kind of positive resolution, right? And then you get to the 4th one, which is called the navigator, which was the whole premise of the book is like, let's learn how to navigate life successfully in the midst of challenges. So this is what I teach pretty much. This is what I do all the time. But the thing is, it's not like, well, Joel and Dr. Elia, we're navigators and you guys are critics. It's not like that. All human beings, and this is my psychology hat on, all human beings have all 4 of those types within themselves or ourselves. But the key is this. Like, in 1 week in March of 2020, when all my speaking engagements got canceled around the world, did I have the deer with the headlights look? You're darn right I did. Like I froze. Like what? Like in 1 week, one email after another. Sorry to inform you, sir, the conference has been canceled. Sorry to, over and over again. So I was frozen in fear initially. And then did I have like a little victim mentality? Yes, I was supposed to speak in Barcelona in October of 2020, which I hear is a beautiful city. I've always wanted to go there. It got canceled. Actually, didn't get, it happened on Zoom, which is not the same as being in Barcelona, obviously. And were there decisions made by our government or by certain entities and so on that I disagreed with that pissed me off from time to time? You're darn right I did, and rightly so, I believe. However, if I stay mad at the government, my boss, whatever, for the next 6 months or 6 years, who am I hurting, Joel? Them?
Only you.
Or myself?
They're winning. They get to keep winning. It's like that philosophy where they talk about the second arrow, right? The first arrow that hits you wounds you, it hurts you. But the second arrow is the arrow that stays in you and you just keep letting it fester.
Exactly. So the point of it is, if you feel sorry for yourself, do it for half an hour. Get the whole orchestra and play the whole violin section, whatever you need to do. It's okay. It's human nature. I did it too. And then pivot and move into navigation mode. If you want to be mad, get mad. Get it out of your system. But do it for an hour, half an hour, whatever. Go for a walk, go for a run, lift some weights. Get it out of your system. And then pivot and become a navigator. Because you want to navigate life successfully. You don't want to be stuck in the victim mode or the critic mode or the fearful mode, because that's a miserable life. Navigators are happy and successful repeatedly because they do certain things consistently. And the first part is listening to what I call the spirit. Whatever you call that voice, the spirit, your higher self, your intuition, that still small voice. That's one of the few absolutes in life. I don't have that many, but this is one of them. And I've been listening to that voice for at least 35, 40 years. Every time I've heard that voice and acted on it, it has always worked out. But because I'm not a perfect man, sometimes I've heard it and ignored it, and I have always paid the price.
Yep.
And when I was younger, I used to ask why. I don't need to ask why anymore because I trust that voice so much. If I get the message, I act on it immediately.
Yeah.
And you see the results immediately. So navigators are very open, not just the mindset, but their heart Their heart is open. So practice self-care is the foundation, but then you got to be open. Practicing gratitude, of course, helps immensely. Taking action, rather than just thinking about it, moving to action. And ultimately, as a result of all that, I think navigators are very kind human beings. They extend a hand of kindness. Not random acts of kindness, but deliberate, conscious acts of kindness. Because, and I used to challenge people even in the middle of the pandemic, like go out and help somebody else. And I could get pushback, like, what am I, my brother's keeper? Like, I'm isolated, I'm in my apartment, I can't go anywhere. How you're asking me to do things. I'm like, listen, first of all, you're not your brother's keeper. You're right. You're your mother's keeper, and your sister's keeper, and your brother's keeper, and the homeless person down the street, because in the end, we're all connected as human beings.
Yeah.
So, well, I can't go anywhere. I don't have any money. I'm isolated. I'm like, you know what? You don't need money. Even if you're isolated, I got a download once in the middle of the night about a friend of mine who was in Greece, and her name kept coming up. I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. The third time it came up, I'm like, I decided to reach out to her, and I called her. It was midnight in Greece. And they had a hard lockdown. Like, they couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she goes, why are you calling me? I'm like, I don't know, Helen. I was thinking about you, and I just wanted to call you. And she goes, well, it's kind of funny you should call me. And I didn't know. I've known her for 45 years. Like, that she had some kind of issue, like breathing. Like, so she literally had to be isolated, like away from her kids, like no contact with anybody. She says, I've been alone in this apartment for 9 days. I haven't talked or seen anybody. Thank you for calling me. And I'm like, well, I didn't know that. I just got the message, right? I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be checking in with you from time to time, and we did. What was the point of that? That didn't cost me anything. What is the worst thing you can do if you listen to that still small voice? I can say, Joel, I'm calling you. Elia, why are you calling me? I don't know, Joel. Just checking up on you. The worst thing you can say to me is, I'm actually doing pretty good. Thanks for thinking of me. That's the worst thing you can say. But more likely, as we know, you're going to say, Elia, it's kind of interesting that you're calling me right now because X, Y, and Z is happening in my life. And that kind of kindness, what does that cost? Nothing. It's just being aware and then reach out and help somebody else. And navigators do that consistently. And my thing is like, do something good for somebody else every day in your life and you'll be the richest man in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
love
I got
that.
that message from my grandfather when I was 5 years old in Greece. He died when I was 6. So I don't have a lot of memories from him. But as a 5-year little boy in Greek, he sat me on his lap. I think he knew he was going. He's died from cancer. I didn't know that back then. And he said, can I tell you a secret? And I'm like, I'm like a little kid. I'm like, yes, Grandpa. You want to be the richest man in the world? Yes, Grandpa. I want to be. And he leaned into me and he whispered in my ear, he says, do something good for somebody else every day and you will be the richest man in the world. In my 5-year little brain, somehow, it was a simple message, right? Of course, at the time, I thought richness meant like having like Pirates of the Caribbean, like gold and silver, like, the loot. I didn't understand what he meant. But as I got older and I saw the wisdom in what he says, like when we reach out and help somebody else, we are so enriched and we are truly the richest people in the world when we do that. That was such a profound statement. So navigators do that on a consistent basis because their own batteries are full because they have practiced self-care.
You know what's so interesting too is you use the term navigator, and I know there's studies that show that when people stay locked in cycles of negativity and they let their feelings and emotions dictate their choices, what we find too is that they don't even look for possible solutions. And so it's funny you call them navigators because navigators navigate and look for solutions. So if you are in that prime state, you're actually going to look for solutions versus, oh, woe is me and I can't do anything. So I love that term navigator. It makes so much sense.
But also, embrace and respect the fact that we all have the victim or the critic or the fearful one. That's also part of our human nature, and it's okay that it is. The point is, don't stay stuck there for 10 years or 10 hours even, or 10 weeks. Feel it, work it through your system. If you need somebody to help you, that's fine too. But then pivot and move into action as a navigator. That's the key. It's not like you shouldn't have those things because that's, we're all imperfect human beings, so we have it. It's okay.
Yeah.
Don't stay stuck though.
Dr. Elia, what would you say is, what's like the one overlooked habit that someone could use to instantly boost their happiness levels? And maybe you already mentioned it, but I'm just curious out of all of them, like.
There is something else, and that has to do more with forgiveness. Which is one of the 7 paths to happiness. But, Gandhi once said that forgiveness is the attribute of the strong, which I love that statement. I will add to that forgiveness equals freedom, And in my private practice, I dealt a lot with addictions. So I had a lot of addicts. My dissertation was on Alcoholics Anonymous, so 12 steps, anyway. And addictions obviously can be devastating. They destroy relationships. They destroy all kinds of things. So as they stayed sober and we worked through their issues and so on, and I would have like one last interview with them, maybe a year after, And I'm like, do you think your spouse has forgiven you? Yes. God, yes. Your kids, yes. Your boss, blah, blah, blah. Yes, 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 yes. Then I would ask the question that's obviously is, have you forgiven yourself? Do you know what the best answer I received? Not the most common, but the best. I'm working on it. That was the best answer. The more typical answer, however, was no. And if you don't learn how to forgive yourself, you can practice a lot of self-care. But I'm telling you, your happiness and your wellness and your health will be compromised as a result of that. And so I teach people, because people just don't know how to do it. I'm like, okay, here's how you practice self-forgiveness. And when you forgive yourself, guess what else? What happens? It's so much easier to forgive somebody else. Okay? So, and I can teach it right now. It takes less than 2 minutes. Like, honestly, it's not that hard.
Yeah, please do.
I ask my clients, I'm like, okay, write down all the things you haven't forgiven yourself for the entire life. It could be 5 things, 50 things, 20 things, whatever. When you're done with that list, I want you to give it a number on a scale of 1 through 10. 10 is I murder somebody. Like I actually murder somebody. Like I'm a killer. 1 is, I spilled milk yesterday, at the store, at the restaurant, and I got home and I was so embarrassed. Okay, that's a 1. So write the list, give it a number. And now we begin. And typically, we begin with the lowest hanging fruit, the ones, the twos, and the threes, because they're easy to forgive, right? And build some kind of momentum and have some practice until you move on to the toughest ones. What I discovered when I started doing this is that alpha males, listen to this. It's kind of funny. When I first introduced it, I'm like, I have some CEOs, I have a lot of senior leaders in my practice, a lot of very successful people. Like, I'm not going to do it that. And I'm like, what? That's my process. He goes, no, I'm going to start with the tens. I'm like, okay, why? Because, but the reasoning was this, because if I can forgive myself with the tens, everything else down the list becomes easier. So, frankly, Joe, I don't give a crap which way people go, as long as they do the exercise. Most people start with the lowest hanging fruit, the easy ones, twos, threes, then we move on to the fours and fives and so on. But if you're alpha and you want to do it your way and do it tens, nines, and eights, it doesn't matter to me, honestly. I don't have a patent to one particular process, as long as you do it. And as we've gone this, and I've done this so many times, forgiveness process, at the end, that piece of paper that's everything written in, we take a match and we burn it and we release it to the heavens, the smoke. And when they walk out of my office, they're 1,000 pounds lighter than they were when they walked in. And sometimes that process takes a few hours, sometimes it takes all day, sometimes it takes an hour, whatever. But because people that are able to forgive themselves and take themselves lightly, right, tend to be happier. And that's something that's, everybody talks about gratitude and, care and self-care and self-love and so on. Sometimes I think self-forgiveness is neglected or forgotten, or maybe it's not at the same level but I'm telling you, show me someone who hasn't forgiven themselves, and I doubt that they're truly happy.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you said that. I remember Wayne Dyer saying something to the same extent that you said, which is forgiveness is man's highest level of consciousness because it shows that he can love. Right. And it just really just encapsulates everything you're saying. So I love that. Is there, when you were doing all your research and also just from your anecdotally, what you saw from all your clients and patients, was there a surprising commonality that was a thread between all of those folks that were achieving lasting happiness?
Honestly, they put in the work. They put in the work. My role really, even now as a coach, but even as a psychologist, was I get to know you, I give you the tools, hold you accountable in some ways, like an accountability coach almost, but you got to do the work. And there are no shortcuts.
That goes back to your point about a choice. And I think also what I love what you said, because I coach too, and I have bad days, but usually it's only a day. I don't go past that. And I try to tell my clients the same thing is, why I have bad days? Because I'm a human. And I'm a human and I make mistakes, but I just course correct a lot faster than most of you. So to your point, the follow through and staying consistent, right? I think a lot of us, we have one bad day and it becomes a week or a month or a year.
And the funny thing is, a lot of people used to come and you're our last hope. The reason why I had 45, patients, I've been to counselors, therapists, groups, and I'm at my end of my rope or my relationship, my marriage, and then you have been, referred to us, you have your reputation and so on. You're the last hope. So I couldn't say no, which was my mistake. I didn't know how to say no. To say no, so I would take everybody on and on and on. But one of the things that I would promise them on our very first session, and I still do it with coaching people, I said, listen, let's take a marriage coaching. If they come into you, they're coming in because they're struggling. So, especially if they say you're our last hope, we've done tons of marriage counseling and so on. I'm like, listen, I will guarantee you one thing. By the time you and I are done, either you will have a spectacular marriage, an amazing, everything you've ever dreamed of in a relationship, or you'll get a divorce. That is my guarantee. But you are not going to go back to the status quo. Why? Because the status quo brought you here, or else right? So that's my guarantee. If you both do the work, great results. If only one of you does the work, then you're most likely heading for a divorce. And if nobody does the work, obviously, and then I would be like, well, don't waste your money, my time, your time, So if we do it right, we got to do it right now. I don't want to come back 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line with the same things over and over again. Like a lot of times it happens in therapy. We talk about the same things. I wasn't like that. I'm like, The goal is for you not to be in my office. They're like, what? I'm like, I'm not abandoning you. I'm just saying the goal in life is for you not to be in this office, to go out and live a good, happy life. That's the goal. They're like, wow, that's different. I'm like, yes, I don't want you to be dependent on me for the rest of your life now. And I have clients that I've been with for 25, 30 years that come back every 2 or 3 years for a tune-up, like an oil change of their soul, if you will. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But not every week after talk about the same BS over and over again with no progress. Then I'm failing them as a professional.
Yep.
Right? So I don't know if that answers your question, but I had a different approach, and I do have a different approach. The goal is not to be here. I'm happy to mentor, to love you, to support you, to be there for you. I have your back, but go out and live a good life.
You know, because you just brought up marriage and intimacy. What do you think, and I'm sure you've seen this in couples and marriages a lot, how do we, or what have you seen best to cultivate that emotional intimacy and keep that strong bond with our partner over time?
And, my greatest success, honestly, is my 33 going on 34 years of marriage. Greatest success, man. And, we look at our kids' friends whose most of their friends' parents have been divorced and so on. And, I recently officiated in 2 of our kids' weddings last year. So last summer was beautiful. We had 2 weddings. And they said, it's so great to see you and Mama, like, show us what it's like. Decades, you're in your 4th decade, and you're more in love. For now, we're in our 4th and 5th honeymoon. Like, our kids are gone, grandkids are on their way, and so on. So we're like, this is our time now. We've done our part. But to show by example that love can become more profound and deeper, but it does take some work. So the forgiveness aspect is huge, right? Communication. And I'm talking about real communication, not BS, like not superficial stuff.
You mean
And
you
so
mean not how was your day and did you sleep
not
good
like
last
that.
night?
I call it HOT, H-O-T, which stands for honest, open, and transparent. That kind of communication. Hot communication, and do it consistently. Now, there's 2 ways you can practice hot communication, because I also do a lot of executive stuff. I'm like, you can communicate. Let me be brutally honest with you and take a 2x4 and hit people over the head. Well, they're going to get defensive, hurt, or leave. Or you can do it from a place of love, which requires vulnerability. You can't be honest, open, and transparent without being vulnerable, too. Otherwise, you're just touching the surface. You're being superficial. So, and it's okay. You know what happens when you get older? And you're still young, but as the years go by, you'll see your ego gets greatly diminished, hopefully, and your heart-centeredness gets greatly increased. So because I'm closer to the other side, I know it. I'm closer to exiting, and not that I want to do it now, but at some point we're all going to exit. So for me, it's all about relationships, and it's all about legacy. It's not about anything material, even though we've been successful. None of that stuff really matters. It's good. I'm not complaining. But really what matters is the depth of your relationships. And like to me, that the fact that my kids have chosen good spouses, because my wife and I must have done something right to choose wonderful human beings, a son-in-law and a daughter-in-law and so on. It's wonderful to see that that's part of the legacy, right, for me.
Yeah.
Is to see the next generation. I love that my son treats his wife with kindness and love. You know what I mean? Like, there's no greater, to me, that's the greatest success. All the other stuff is good, of course, but it's the heart. It's the relationships that matter. And you can't take shortcuts. You can't expect, I want to have a great marriage if you don't put in the work. You got to put in the work. And I don't like to call it's not even work. It's just an investment, whatever word you want to use. On a daily basis, kindness, service, hold space for your spouse. And that goes both ways, not just, show up. If you're a man, show up like a king energy. I had my daughter call me out a few years ago. He goes, Dad, that's not king energy. You and Mom do this dance. You guys, you do this dance. You're like Peter Pan at first, and then you ask forgiveness later or whatever. You like it. And she nailed me. And she was totally right, but she did it with a lot of love. And I said, you're right, honey. the way I handled that situation, that was not king energy. You're totally right. And I'm like, thanks for correcting me. Thanks for letting me know. I mean, that's the kind of relation we have with our kids, you know. I'm okay if my kids call me out. If they're like, yeah, you're right. I own it. It's true. I could have handled that better. So then, and I'm so grateful to her for doing that because I have been showing up more like a king energy. Like not most of the time, like I try to do it all, you know. Yeah, most of the time I'm not perfect, but I much better because now I'm aware when I'm not in the
Dr.
king
Elia,
energy.
if someone is listening, they don't know what king energy is. How would you describe that? I love that with that phrase. That's great.
You know, it's hard to do. How can I explain that? It's the divine masculine. We hear so much about, you know, masculine, you know, toxic masculinity and so on. It's the divine masculine, which is both love, acceptance, support of your spouse, protector, provider. I mean, it's got all the great elements because my wife is a queen. She deserves for me to be a king, right? She's a queen, and my wife is brilliant. She's just very different. We're so different, but I mean,
Same here.
like they're so different. Like, just let me put it this way: when we first met, we were getting married. I was in graduate school getting my PhD. I was in, you know, school debt. My net worth was minus. It was in the zero, not zero. Zero would be good. Minus. And my wife, dude, was a Hollywood producer, working in the studios in Hollywood. She, I, she paid for our honeymoon to go to the Virgin Islands. Like, I didn't have anything. I'm like, I'll make this up to you. Just hang in there with me. Just give me a little bit free, Maria. You know. So she's a badass.
That's so
But
cool.
kind of an introvert, like, but brilliant, like straight A students who was all like scholarships. I mean, she's just brilliant, and I trust her. I look up to her, and we're partners in the true sense of the word, partnership. I'm not above her; she's not above me. You know, I don't control her like she doesn't control. Like, control is the anti-king energy. If you think you need to control your significant other, whatever, you're sadly mistaken, and you're gonna fail. Period. Because at some point, either you'll beat her down so badly in terms of self-worth or self-esteem that she may not leave you as a result of that, or most women at some point get to the point that I've had enough of you and I'm out. Or if she stays with you, she's going to be unhappy and miserable, and you have contributed to that. That's not king energy. King energy is love, support, help them to fulfill their dreams. It's not always about us. It's about their dreams and their aspirations. That king energy. Show up and honey, I got your back. What do you want to do? Is that what you want to do? I got it. I'm right here. Whatever
Yeah.
you need. That's king energy.
That's so good. That is so good. And I love the paradigm that you live in. My wife is a queen, you said. And you know that. And she knows you're the mutual respect that you're the king. I mean, that's such a powerful place. I mean, imagine if more guys just took on that energy, that idea. Like, my wife is a freaking queen, man. And then they have the same idea for themselves. I mean, so powerful. One of the things I know you mentioned in your book too is these golden moments of life. Can you kind of talk about that and share that?
Yeah, you know, I think the greater the gap between expectations and reality, the greater the pain, the frustration, the anger, and so on. I mean, look at any kind of customer service. You know, it's because somebody had certain expectations that weren't met. So on a personal level, when reality matches your expectations, I think that equals happiness. I had these expectations and they, boom, great. But sometimes in life, reality exceeds our expectations. And I call that joy. You know, there are these perfect moments, you know, the birth of your first child, perhaps, a sunset in Maui or the Greek island of Santorini that exceed. And because those things don't happen every day, be in the moment when they happen. And just take in, you know, I was a champion swimmer when I was a young man, and I remember there was one swimming meet, the Golden State Championships in Beverly Hills, California. It was a weekend event. I had 4 individual races and 2 relays with my team, the Santa Monica Swim Club, and I won all 4 of them. And the relays won all. We won gold, so I had 6 golds and meet records for all that. And believe me, it was a perfect meet. It was the perfect like sport. Like, I realized back then this may never happen to me again. So enjoy it because You can't improve on perfection. And it never happened again in my long swimming career. I never had like that event that everything was like I was in the zone, right? And so when it does happen, milk it for all it's worth. Because that fulfills your heart, your soul, your body. You're like, man, I'm like the endorphin, the dopamine, the serotonin. I mean, you're getting bombarded by the drugs that your brain produces, right? Enjoy them because they are fleeting you don't stay at that level forever. So when you have them, enjoy them, be grateful for them, share them if you can with your loved ones. And that also, the funny thing is we just came back from Europe for 3 weeks, and every place we went to, like, oh, we got to bring the kids here. Because when you love people and you have a positive experience, you want to share it. I don't want it for myself. Like, well, how good would it be if I did it by myself? Like, no, I want to share with people that I love.
Yeah. I want to start wrapping some things up, but I was just thinking, are there like, do you have like your own happiness rituals? I know you mentioned your gratitude walk, but is there like a top 3 things, or do you do all 7 daily to maintain that happiness tank?
I don't do them daily because and self-forgiveness has always come easy for me. It drives my wife crazy. It's like, are you ever like, it just comes easy. It's easy because I don't take myself so seriously. That's why, So I don't in this forgiveness aspect. I mean that slate is clean. So when something comes up and I make a mistake or whatever, I'm very quick to say, okay, well that's again, what can you learn from it? Because I think that's I go back to Nelson Mandela. What can I learn from it? So forgiveness comes easy. The kindness aspect is something that's on a daily basis for me. I reach out to people. I love people big, and it makes me feel better. Because I think with kindness, everybody wins, both the giver and the receiver. So that's something that I do on a daily basis. The self-care is daily. The gratitude, I think, is daily. One of the other paths to happiness, of course, is knowing your purpose in life and living it. And I was fortunate because I feel like I found my purpose really early on, which is to leave this world a better place than I found it. And I feel like I've accomplished that. Like if I died today, I'm on the plus side big time. And I'm not saying that as an arrogant. It's a factual statement. Just like I've helped hundreds of that. So knowing your purpose and living it is a big part of it. And the other one that we haven't talked about is eliminating toxic relationships. Why? Because let's say you and I practice all the self-care in the world and this forgiveness and gratitude and kindness, but we surround ourselves with toxic people. It's going to rob us of our health and happiness. So that's something that I've consciously had to do. And I kid you not, for the last 20 years, I don't have toxic people in my life anymore. And I teach people how to do that because that's a topic. That's a whole different topic. We can talk about that for a long time.
I'll have to bring you on for round 2 and we'll talk about just that.
Yeah, alone. Because how to eliminate toxic relationships from your life once and for all.
I love that because I always think about the body too. I always tell from a holistic, I'm a very big natural health person. And so I always tell people that these toxicities, if you're just looking at it like heavy metals or something with your gut, I always say toxicities create deficiencies. And that is why you have XYZ disease or just manifestation of your health being poor. So don't focus on all these other things. Just remove the deficiency, remove the toxicities. Your body will heal on its own. So I love it. To the same your point, you want to heal, get the toxic stuff out of your life.
The funny thing is when I bring this up, people are like, "Well, what if it's a member of your family?" And I'm like, "Of course it's a member of your family. At least one." Like what the heck? Yes, yeah. Yes. Who would it be? I mean, of course there are other people at work and so on. So I lean into it. I'm like, yes. But it's not that hard to get rid of, and it's really not as hard as people think.
I love that. That is so good. Man, I could talk to you forever. Dr. Elia, tell everybody just where they can grab the book and learn more about you. I don't know, where are you big on social media? Is it LinkedIn or Instagram?
I think LinkedIn would be Elia Gourgouris, PhD. Instagram, Dr. Elia G. But really on my website, dreliagourgouris.com. You can find everything you want from me, and if you invite me somewhere to speak, I promise you I will come, because this is spreading the message and spreading the light to a lot more people. I do it across the globe, and I love it, and I love to travel and come to your community and to your place and help people navigate whatever challenge they're facing while maintaining their happiness. That's the key.
I love that. That is so good. Dr. Elia Gourgouris, we appreciate you so much for being on the show. Happiness expert. Go follow him. Go get the book. So good. Thank you, my friend.
Joel, thank you for being on the show. It was such a pleasure. And I need to get to know more about you. I started following you on Instagram just before this. I'm going to be following you a lot from now on.
The feeling's mutual, man. I'm gonna have to have you come out and speak in Idaho, where I'm at right now, and bring you out, and
Oh,
we'll
where? I've spoken in Idaho, actually. Where? In
I'm
Boise?
pretty much in Boise. Yeah.
Yeah, I've spoken in Boise. I've been up there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we're
I'd
gonna have
love
to
to
make
come
something
back.
happen. He's
Sounds good,
coming.
man.
Let's go.
All right. Okay.
All right, my friend. Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate it.